Hi everybody, Jim Ostrowski with a special Florida edition of the Liberty Moving podcast. The podcast hasn't been broadcasting regularly for reasons I won't get into, but we're going to get back on track. So, what are we going to talk about today? Well, I'm right in the middle of this campaign for chair of the LP. So, to talk about that a little bit. I was too lazy to bring my selfie stick, so you're going to have to deal with a wobbly camera and etc. But so we had a debate in North Carolina, and then I rewatched it with some commentary by the Liberty Alliance people. And they had some constructive criticism. It's actually very helpful to get feedback because then you know what people have issues with or don't quite understand the platform. So, and, you know, I'm not complaining as a trial lawyer. I can't, you know, if I started to complain about the debate format, that would look a little silly. So I don't have any problem with the debate format. The only problem and we're having a debate in Texas next week, and I guess a couple more online. The problem is my approach to what I think the Libertarian Party should be doing is quite revolutionary, different. I'm an outsider, and as one of the judges in Buffalo said as a compliment years ago, "You're a real shit disturber, Jim." And the motto of my campaign, which there was a comment on the thread about it, which I didn't understand the comment, but take the red pill. They thought I didn't understand what that means. I think I understand what it means, but if I'm wrong, you explain it to me from the movie The Matrix. But the problem is that the short answer format of these debates does not really allow me, you know, I can talk about the Libertarian Hall of Fame, but there's a specific concept behind it, and it's difficult to get into that. So what I'm going to do is, in a debate format, what I'm going to do is next few days, on vacation, but, you know, working a little bit too, is I'm going to put some memos out there and maybe do some podcasts and just sort of flesh out the platform so that people can understand it better. I mean, I don't care if you know, if you don't like my platform, fine, but I do care if you don't. That's your choice. I do care if you don't understand my platform, because that's really on me. So I'm just going to go over these points in greater detail than on social media, longer posts, and obviously the walking podcast gives me as much time as I want, although I try to keep it under 25 minutes so I don't bore people to death or bore myself to death. So the memo I put out yesterday, I just explained how I'm using the term. So there's no God of the dictionary. I don't get to dictate what terms mean, but I do get to dictate how I'm using a term in a specific context. That's on me. Whether that specialized definition, you know, is taken up by other people. Language is a social convention. I'm not going to get into all of that. But at a certain point, if you're using words that are just completely out of touch with the way other people are using words, you have a failure to communicate. But on the other hand, there's always going to be people who use terms differently from you. There's nothing wrong with that. That's how language works. Language evolves, and so on. So I just want to point out, so direct action, and I put a little memo out on this, but I'll go into it. I'll go into it a few times. Because I think the way I'm using the term is a little different from how people have traditionally used the term. So direct action, to me, is the opposite of of political action. So what's political? Let's start there, because that's what we're doing now. We're doing political action. We're running candidates, we're supporting candidates, we're voting, we're lobbying, and we're going to court. And so what is the similar idea behind all of these forms of politics? Well, it's indirect action. Indirect action. Politics is indirect action. Why? Because you're trying to get somebody else, you're doing something, but the point of your action is to get somebody else to do something. And I'm not going to go into that now. So in my 19-page memo, which is on X and Facebook, if you want to die of boredom, I think I listed 11 reasons why politics is rigged. So you can go there and read. So the problem with trying to get other people to do something is politics is rigged. And just give you one example to flesh that out. When you're trying to get people in the country to do something, you do understand that 90% of those people, slightly lower than that, it used to be a little higher, it's actually good. About 90% of those people went to government school. And as I pointed out in my book, Government Schools Are Bad for Your Kids, the purpose of government school is to brainwash you. That's why they exist. The propaganda aspect of government school wasn't like an accident. It didn't pop up later. It didn't evolve. That was the reason why they were put into existence in the first place. So the purpose of government school is to brainwash your kids politically. That's the main purpose. There's other purposes. So if you're out there as a libertarian candidate and you're trying to persuade the public and you're falling on deaf ears, well, don't be surprised, because 90% of the people you talk to, it's 88%, but whatever, have been brainwashed in K through 12 government schools from the age of 5 or 6 to 18 or whatever, if they didn't drop out. So that's one of the 11 reasons why it's rigged. That's probably the biggest reason, though. And I have a direct action strategy that's specifically designed to deal with that problem. But I'm just trying to define terms here. So politics is indirect action. It is difficult to persuade other people to do things. So what I'm suggesting is there is another way. There is a better way. And this is what the Libertarian Party should start to do without stopping politics. I'm going to talk about that a little later today. Maybe now, I don't know. I have no notes. This is very spontaneous. So, there's a thing called direct action. So what's direct action? Well, those direct action in terms of libertarian politics is there's certain things you can do yourself that will almost certainly, depending on this example, but with a high probability in almost every example, will maximize your liberty. I don't know why I say maximize, it's not the right word. Will increase your liberty. And not only will increase your liberty, but by the nature of these actions, they will tend, even if you're just the one person doing it, there's a little sort of drop in the ocean effect that you're moving society also closer to liberty. And then the proviso, the kicker is, if more and more people do it, then it becomes a really big sort of splash effect. The puddle turns into a pond, the pond turns into a lake, the lake turns into an ocean, if enough people do it. And the best example is voting with your feet. I love that example because we're already doing it in the movement through this Free State Project. We know it works. I think people generally agree that it works. But I'm going to make a stronger point. It can't fail. It has to work. And the example I used yesterday was the least free state, according to Freedom in the 50 States, is New York. New York is 212 miles from New Hampshire at the closest point. If you move 212 miles to New Hampshire, you've increased your liberty. You have fewer regulations, you have more freedom, and you're certainly spending less on taxes. So it can't not work unless you get hit by a car and die, or get attacked by a bear, as you pull into your driveway of your new house. Those libertarians, they got to regulate bears a little better, from what I hear on TikTok. So, but there's another aspect. There's the social aspect. There's the collective. Can I use the word collective as a libertarian? The social impact. What's the social impact? Well, since you moved out of New York, you're no longer, you're starving the beast of all that revenue, fees and traffic tickets and taxes and all that stuff that the New York political machine siphons off about 1%, is my estimate, to maintain its power, so that when you try to run against them, they have $1 million, you have 3,000 that your friends and neighbors contributed. And so there's the New York machine loses a little bit of power. And the New Hampshire sort of libertarian movement gains a little bit of power because they've got another supporter of their project, another voter, if you will. Somebody who's going to maybe donate a couple of bucks, show up at an event, and all that money helps keep the Free State Project alive. So that's the distinction between direct action and political action. Political action is indirect, and political action basically does not work. Now, I'm going to talk a little later. I guess I've necessarily created the impression that I'm against political action. I'm not. That may seem contradictory. It's not. But the bottom line is, with very few, and people want to nitpick. It's like folks, don't nitpick. I'm talking about overall, in the big picture. Have there been some small little victories here and there? They mentioned, drug laws. Well, geez, I spent 7 years on the project. I'd like to think that I know a little bit about this subject. I've written, 7 or 8 articles on the subject, including a 95-page law review. But let me just digress into that. The New York marijuana regime is really quite awful. And I'm almost thinking it was better off in the days you just go out on the street and buy some pot from whoever your buddy drug dealer was, pot dealer. It's become a cartel. They punish people who aren't in the cartel. They punish people who are politically unpopular, who are involved in marijuana in some way, shape, or form, by enforcing federal laws against them when they're not enforcing federal law. I mean, if you're going to enforce, not sure where the trail ends here. If you're going to enforce federal laws against people involved in the marijuana industry, you could prosecute Kathy Hochul. She's the governor, and the New York State's running like a cannabis industry, a cannabis cartel, and making money from it. It's like, why aren't you? So some of these things that people throw out as, oh no, we've made a lot of progress. Well, not really. But you haven't made net progress. And in my memo, I have actual statistics because I actually do research to to back up the fact that we have less liberty now overall than we did in 1971. So that's one point, and I put that memo out, and I've just explained it again, and I'll be explaining it again. I think I'm going to take more time in the debates to explain it, because if people don't understand that, they're missing the core of my platform. It's getting a little noisy here. I think I'm gonna double back to the bike path. Hold on a second. I was gonna grab some coffee, but I can get some later. So on that point of research, and another point that was brought up, I used the figure $500 million as the amount of money that the libertarian movement spends every year. So that's an estimate. I used Grok AI to try to come up with a number. It's an estimate. You have to tease it out because AI can be a little lazy, and you have to sort of prompt it and say, what about this organization? What about that organization? So when I did this after the debate to check out the number, it seemed like that they were saying the number was 400 million. This kind of stuff happens a lot. I don't have the old thread that said 500 million, but so the bottom line is it's very difficult. There's a lot of libertarian organizations, and it's very difficult to figure out what all their budgets are. But my point is that the libertarian movement, broadly defined, spends hundreds of millions of dollars every year. And as I said in the debate, I'm calling out the whole movement as well. I'm not just picking on the Libertarian Party. I think the entire movement has to justify what it's doing. I think think tanks are great. I've been associated with them all my life. I think research is great. Writing is great. Seminars are great. All that's true. Those are truisms. But I'm calling out the whole movement. I mean, we're not winning, folks. We're not winning, folks. And maybe some of these think tanks could have like a strategy conference, because nobody talks about strategy. What is strategy, Jim? Well, that's your plan for victory. What's our plan for victory in this movement? That's why I'm running. I have a plan for victory. I have a strategy. So what else am I going to talk about? The Hall of Fame, a couple other ideas, and then I'm just going to call it quits for the day. So the Hall of Fame idea, I know that's a tough sell. It sounds pie in the sky. The purpose of the Hall of Fame idea is it's very specific. People do not understand that libertarianism is a historical movement. It did not start in 1971. It started in 1646. And far from being a failure or ineffective, it has been spectacularly successful in the broad sweep of history. And most of the things that we like about the United States are attributable to libertarians in some degree, usually in a very large degree. Like the concept of the right of revolution, which laid the groundwork for the creation of this country that we live in. That's, in my view, you could disagree with me. If you're a historian, whatever, you may say, no, you're wrong. But my view is that that's a libertarian idea. Algernon Sidney wrote that. I consider him a libertarian. He was executed by the king for writing that book, so he paid a pretty fucking dear price for that. That's why I like to remember the guy, and I mention his name, and I highlight his work. And so maybe he goes in the Libertarian Hall of Fame. But, so, the Hall of Fame is an attempt to solve a very specific marketing problem. We have a major marketing problem in the liberty movement. Have you folks noticed? Take the red pill, please. People do not associate the word libertarian with anything other than a relatively new third party that never wins elections on the state or national level. They do not associate the Libertarian Party with the grand historical liberty movement that created the Bill of Rights, that propounded the concept of free trade, free movement of people, natural rights, that rights don't come from the fucking government, that you're born with these rights. There's a right of revolution. In other words, you could change things peacefully, hopefully, but you have that right to bear arms in case you need them. So if you have a better idea for fixing the huge marketing problem that the libertarian movement and the Libertarian Party has, go for it. Let me know what it is, please, because I haven't heard it. What else? I'm going to close on this. There were chuckling over 7,500 steps a day. Again, the Walk for Liberty concept, which I'm executing right now for myself and society, because the better shape I'm in, the fewer resources I use, and those resources can be used for other purposes by other people who are sicker than me or for non-medical reasons. So we're spending, I think it's 17% of GDP on health. The government pays half. All that government money, that's a reduction of your liberty. We're the Libertarian Party. So I'm trying to solve a very specific problem. And if you criticize the Walk for Liberty concept, that's fine. Knock yourself out. I don't care. Again, the only thing I care about is if you understand my idea and you disagree with it, fine, vote for somebody else. But if I do care if you don't understand my concept. So that's why I'm trying to explain the concept. So my question to the critics of the Walk for Liberty is, what's your alternative? Well, we're going to go to the state capitol and free up the healthcare system so that there's more competition and costs will be reduced. And you know what I say to that? Bullshit. No, you're not. You're not going to do that. I've actually engaged in lobbying in my life. I actually know something about lobbying. And I know that lobbying is, extremely difficult to work, because by the time you get to Albany, if you're in New York, the lobbyists have already bought off all the politicians. Politicians are bought and paid for in the political marketplace by donations and other mechanisms. So, again, 17% of GDP, we have the least healthy, wealthy country in the world. And I'm trying to solve that problem. So what's your answer? Don't just criticize me. Give me your answer so we can all have a pretty good fucking laugh. So sorry to end on a sour note like that. But no, I'm serious. What's your idea? Don't just mock me out. I don't care if you mock me out. It's fine. Laugh, fine. I love a good laugh. But give me your idea so I can laugh back. So that's it for now. I'm going to be doing a lot more of these memos and podcasts to flesh out my platform. I think I'll do one later in the day because I've used up my time. And I'm gonna talk, and I'll do a memo and then I'll do a podcast. Why not? I'm on vacation. I have time. Let me explain that I am not against politics, in spite of everything I said. You might think I am, but I didn't say that. All I said was that politics as it's currently done does not work. So I'm going to do a separate podcast and a memo on that, maybe later in the day, maybe tomorrow. But thanks for listening, everybody, live from Punta Gorda, Florida, the second freest state